Hey guys, it's Eli the Tree Guy here today in a local community trail system that's actually in a pretty heavily urbanized area, and we're going to be doing a nature walk identifying different forest types and different habitats. You know, it can be really hard to identify all the different myriad species that you're going to see in the understory, overstory, between different habitats. But one of the cool kind of tools you can use to help identify different species is to pick different habitat types, select one species, and then see that species replicated in other areas and similar habitat types that you visit throughout your community. So let's jump into it today. Guys, to keep it really simple, we're going to be talking about 4 different habitat types using a grid. So you can do dry and wet and then sunny and shady. So dividing that up into the 4 types, you could do sunny and dry, shady and dry, sunny and wet, shady and wet. Now, as you look behind me, there's going to be all sorts of different species. And of course, we're going to have crossover between these different zones. But the important thing is to look for patterns and to just pick one species that you might see on a walk and then notice that species in different places in similar type habitats. All right guys, so now we're closer to this stream crossing down here. So we're getting in a more wet shaded environment. And here we have Carpus caroliniana, AKA the American hornbeam. Now this tree goes by many different names. Sometimes people will call it the ironwood due to its hard wood density. Some people call it the blue beech due to its similarity to the American beech. Some people call it even musclewood due to the rippled muscle effect that the bark has. But the most common name you're gonna hear is American hornbeam. And this does really well in the understory. It's gonna be growing in these more wet environments, and it's a good sign of a healthy ecosystem. Whereas, other trees may not survive here really well, this tree is not gonna get more than 20 to 30 feet and is gonna do absolutely great in this semi-wet, semi-shaded environment. Here we have a little bit of a larger specimen behind me here, and then also this one directly in front of me. And these provide a lot of ecological resources, including, food for beavers, being that they're so close to stream type areas, but also it feeds birds and other mammals with the seeds and nutlets. It provides a lot of nesting habitat for understory birds, and then too it feeds a lot of caterpillars. Over 68 different species of caterpillar use this tree for foods. Even smaller trees like this in the understory provide a lot of value, and you really help squash all the invasive plants that are growing up right behind me. Down there you can kind of see a grove of multiflora rose, really terrible for the environment, but you can see as this has shaded out a lot of things underneath, it's providing a lot of room for mammals and other small animals like reptiles and amphibians to crawl under here. So you can identify this tree with its simple serrated leaves that look often very similar to American beech leaves, but these are just going to be a little bit smaller. And then if we come over here, another giveaway that makes it look slightly distinct from American beech bark is just the fact that you're going to have more of these ripples and striations that give it kind of its namesake being called the musclewood. But typically on an American beech, it's going to be a lot smoother than this tree. So that'll give it away. If nothing else, just the size, with American beech approaching up to 100 foot. So this is, probably getting close to being maxed out here in this understory. And it's super cool to see. And these trees are also fun to climb too. Now guys, we're gonna talk about sunny and wet environments. And behind me here, you can see this stormwater management facility with these black willow trees, Salix nigra. And what's really important about these trees is that they're gonna be stabilizing a lot of that floodplain soil, and they're more brittle, which you might think, why would you want a brittle tree? But in fact, guys, those branches that break off can restabilize the soil, create habitat, create more opportunity for eroding silt and things like that to catch sediment and to build a soil base around the tree. And what's really cool about the black willow is that it can actually grow new trees simply from the sticks embedded in soil. So even if it falls over in a flood or torrential downpour or something like that, it's still gonna have opportunity to regenerate. All right, so to identify black willow, we're gonna take a look at the leaves here, and they're really narrow, simple leaves. I mean, there's not much to them, but they are pretty distinctive, compared to most other trees around here. One lookalike would obviously be the willow oak, which for its namesake looks very similar to willow leaves that we see here. Also, you're gonna see a lot of those vertical striations on the bark. It's gonna be slightly rough, and you're gonna see them in these disturbed floodplains like you see just behind me here. If these areas are flooded and disturbed, they could be destroyed very quickly. You want a tree that's gonna regenerate and gonna grow really fast, just like these trees here behind me. And these can potentially get up to 100 foot tall. I don't know if it would be the case just with ice and snow, some of those branches breaking off, but it is cool to see this environment beneath me, and just all the waste and twigs that they've put down are really helping suppress some of that undergrowth that might otherwise compete or send competing vines that grow up and attack those branches. There are plenty of riparian type trees and trees that grow in wet environments that do well in the shade, but this is one of those that's really only going to do well in full sun. And you're going to see it at the mouth of different water bodies like this. Typically at the edge of streams, maybe ponds, but you're not going to find black willow in the shade predominantly. So this is one of those, if you're out in a sunny and wet area, this is a great species to look for, and they have really cool uses too. Also guys, medicinally, these trees are really great because they contain the precursors for aspirin, which can be used medicinally if you chew on the bark, and has been used traditionally in similar applications like that for the same desired medicinal effect of aspirin. So this is really cool. They can also be used to make whistles with its ability to be kind of pliable and lighter. So this is a really cool species. All right guys, here's another environment that's dry and sunny, and you can see in this mulch bed all around me, here we have juniper, which is really a genus name. Of course, these are found all throughout the world, essentially the world's plant. And you can identify them by their scales. So this is a type of cypress here, which has scales as opposed to needles that you might see on a pine or any of the other conifers like fir, spruce, things like that. In any case, guys, you're not gonna find these unless it's really sunny and dry. And of course, there are exceptions, but by and large, these are gonna be really great for places that are just getting absolutely cooked with sun, which is, kind of where I'm at right now. If you see eastern red cedar, which is our native juniper, out on the side of a highway, you can bet that, either that land is being managed or maybe it's a little bit drier site, which, they are gonna help build up that soil base for a later succession species like, the white oak. Here we have a tree that is dry and shady, and this is the white oak, Quercus alba. This tree can get over 100 foot tall, live to be over 400 years, is an absolute ecological powerhouse, guys. And what you're gonna notice as we kind of walk along this ridge is further down that hill, you're gonna have a riparian area with a stream with a lot of different type species. But on this uphill portion of this environment, you're gonna have drier soils, and it's gonna favor tree species like hickory and then another white oak here, a little bit larger. And the reason these trees are so important and are great for this habitat is that they're providing all sorts of acorns yearly. They're feeding all sorts of different insects, especially from the Lepidoptera species. Over 500 species can live on this tree. And that's really, really important, guys, for small birds. It might take 6,000 to 9,000 insects to raise a small bird from a fledgling to adulthood. So anytime you have all these other trees, these oak trees, hickories, things like that, those are gonna be supplying caterpillars in this environment that are gonna allow birds to grow up to adulthood more successfully. Here you can see even that little squirrel right down there behind me at that larger white oak tree. Thinking about the importance of these species, these are gonna be areas in this uphill, drier, more shaded environment. They're gonna be providing a lot of food, not necessarily cover, not necessarily some of the other benefits that you might get down lower down near the stream. And it's gonna be easily identifiable by its soft lobed leaves that have nice big sinuses in between, and it almost kind of looks similar to a handprint. And you'll see the subspecies like chestnut oak, swamp white oak, different things like that. But the important thing to note that would differentiate it from a red oak is the fact that it does not have spiny tips at the tip of the leaf. So if you guys are looking for the white oak, look for some of this, wider flaky bark here, and you'll see it even on this larger tree. As I come this way, just some of this more flaky, lighter color type bark, And that morphology of the bark is gonna be changing up the tree as it moves up the tree. So, you know, it might look a little different depending on where you see it in the canopy and also where you see it on the trail. A close lookalike that you gotta watch out for is the tupelo tree, also at Ecological Powerhouse, but this bark looks very similar. So you can see that kind of white flaky bark, and especially for mature trees in the wintertime, they can be easily mistaken between the two. The main difference being, obviously, you know, the tupelo tree is gonna have a simple leaf, and then, you know, the branching structure too for tupelo trees is usually more at a 90-degree angle, and you can see that kind of demonstrated on this tree here. So when you're looking in the winter, you can look more closely at the buds to kind of differentiate between the two. But guys, knowing where white oaks are is gonna help you know where deer are, and this is gonna help you know where the soils might be a little bit drier. Again, it's not a hard and fast rule. Of course, there could be white oaks in lower, more swampland areas, but guys, they tend not to like wet feet, and they tend not to like to be saturated too long because it can lead to problems like root rot and eventual failure of the tree if they get too much water, especially if you change the hydrology around them, like installing a yard. It can spell bad news for the white oak.